Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Norfolk Wildlife Trust's AGM 2024. My name is Patrick Barkham. I'm the president of Norfolk Wildlife Trust, and joining me in the panel that you see in front of you is Elliot Lyne, our Chief Executive Officer, and Alice Liddell, our Chair, and Lindsay Whiteman, our Treasurer. And you will be hearing from all of us as the evening progresses. We also have members of our senior leadership team here tonight who will be on hand to answer specific questions as they arise. So I think we're going to have hopefully more than 40 people join us tonight. Thank you very much for coming. And we will be recording this AGM, and this will be added to our website so that any members who've been unable to join us tonight can watch it when they wish. There will be a section tonight for questions. We've had a number of questions in advance that different members of staff will answer, but you're welcome to add questions as we proceed tonight. If you can do so in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat function, that would be great. And I will read out the questions when we get to that section of tonight. So in terms of voting, My Voice are an independent elections provider, and they're assisting us with voting at tonight's AGM and ensuring scrutiny of that process. We've had loads of votes already, which is really encouraging and brilliant. But can we ask members who will be voting today to make sure that they've connected to the My Voice voting platform via the link which has been sent to them on email? And we suggest that you have this open ahead of the voting process. The voting platform will be open at the start of this meeting, so you can vote on resolutions now if you wish, or when the invitation to vote is called. If you're attending the meeting but have previously voted or appointed a proxy to vote on your behalf, you won't be able to vote again during this meeting, obviously. And given the virtual format and the method of voting, we will confirm whether the vote has passed later on in this meeting. So just to give you a quick outline of the timetable tonight, we will finish promptly at 8 o'clock. We're going to start with the formal business and including a presentation from Lindsay, our treasurer, and we'll go through those resolutions. And then we'll continue with the informal business, which will include speeches from the panel, so from myself and Alice, who will look back at what the trust has been doing over the last financial year, and Elliot, who will perhaps look more forward. We'll have the award of the Sydney Long Medal for 2024, which is a lovely film. And we will also have a section for answering your questions. As I said, we've had some already. And if you want to add more, please write in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll aim to have a quick break at 7:10. If we're running late, we won't have that break. And then probably the highlight, well, definitely the highlight of tonight is our own Helen Bonchkowska, who is talking to two brilliant Norfolk farmers about how they're helping wildlife on their farms and farming in new and innovative and wildlife friendly ways. So that's going to be a great discussion coming up later. Right, so let's crack on with the formal business. And so I'm going to read through the resolutions. So resolution 1, confirm minutes of AGM held on 19th of October 2023. And resolution 2 is to receive the report of council and approve the report and audited financial statements for the year ending 31st of March 2024. And I'd like to now hand over to Lindsay Whiteman, our treasurer, who's going to present a short presentation on the finances. Lindsay, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. In support of Resolution 2, I would like to summarise the accounts for the year to 31st of March 2024. Starting with income for the year to the 31st of March was 8.2 million, an increase on the previous year of 1.4 million. This increase is largely attributable to the legacy income increase of 1.6 million. We are extremely grateful for the 2.3 million of legacy income received during the year, the majority of which has been designated to fill long-term strategic objectives. Income from membership subscriptions has also risen by 38,000 during the year, taking total membership income to 826,000. Grant income of 2.1 million was received, with over 1.5 million of agri-environmental grant income. Other grant income included over 126,000 from the Environment Agency and 133,000 from the Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts. Expenditure for the year to 31st of March 2024 was 8.1 million. This included spend on charitable activities of 5.4 million, fundraising and publicity spend of 590,000 and membership servicing costs of 607,000. This means that for every £1 spent by the Trust, 82 pence directly related to charitable activities, which is comparable to other charities of a similar size. With unrealised gains on investments, the result for the year was a net surplus of 364,000. With regards to the subsidiaries, Norfolk Wildlife Services saw an increase in turnover to 331,000 and generated a profit of 29,000. Norfolk Wildlife Enterprises also saw an increase in turnover and gross profit, but due to the continued impacts of the cost of living crisis, reported a loss of 115,000. It's worth noting that NWT carries out the collection of various funds at the visitor centres on behalf of the Trust, for example, membership subscriptions, donations and gift-aided ticket entries. This income totaled 105,000 during the year and is included in the Trust's accounts, thereby reducing NWT's income and profit accordingly. Looking at the balance sheet, total net assets as at 31st of March 2024 totaled 25.5 million, which is an increase of 364,000 on the previous year. 14.4 million of this relates to land and property. The Trust investments were valued at 3.9 million at year end, which was an increase in value of 305,000. The Trust remains in a really strong financial position and has been delivering the strategy developed in the previous year. Thank you. I'll now hand back over to Patrick.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Thank you for that. So to continue with the resolutions, just to reiterate, I don't know if you've seen, there's a message in the chat box just to say that members who have not already voted will have received an email from elections@myvoice.com. Please check your junk or spam folder if you haven't received this email. And to reissue your email, please visit anyway, you'll see the link in the chat function if you're having trouble getting online to vote as we go along, as we proceed. So to continue with the resolutions, thank you, Lindsay, again. Resolution 3, to reappoint Lovewell Blake as the Trust's auditors and authorise council to determine their remuneration. And now I'm going to hand over to Alice, our chair, who will explain the trustee and vice president recruitment process, which is coming up in the next resolutions. Alice.
Thank you, Patrick. And I hope I'm going to be clear because I've got a bit of a cold. So, but let's see how we get on. Before we move on to the vote for resolutions 4 and 5, I will outline the process that the Trust has adopted in relation to the recruitment of trustees. In line with the Charity Governance Code, we operate an open recruitment process, so we advertise widely, followed by this AGM. Our aim is to have a diverse and inclusive board of trustees with a good balance of skills and experience to govern the Trust. The process is overseen by our nominations group, chaired by an independent member. The nominations group also manages the process of recruitment of the president, vice presidents and ambassadors. We were delighted this year with the response for trustee applications. We had 15 applications and there were only 5 spaces available. 10 applicants were shortlisted and 5 have been nominated by the Council of Trustees and are recommended to members. Those candidates who were unsuccessful in making the preferred list of the nominations group were offered the chance to stand but chose not to do so. So the nominations group recommendations are for Glenn Houchell, up for re-election, for Harry Buskell, Richard Carter, Richard Powell and Bailey Tate for election as new trustees. You as members can vote for all 5 as a group or for only some of them. Going forward and with next year in mind, I'd like to stress that it's open to any member of Norfolk Wildlife Trust to apply to become a trustee. And if you're interested, may I suggest that you register your interest with our governance officer, Marion Riches, who will take things from there. The nominations group also oversees the process of recommending to members the appointment of any vice presidents. And you'll see from Resolution 5 that Sue Rowe, who has to stand down this year after serving 9 years as a trustee, has been nominated and is recommended. Thank you. Over to you again, Patrick.
Thank you, Alice. So, Resolution 4, referring to what Alice has just explained, to re-elect and elect members of the Council of Trustees. And then we have Resolution 5, which is to approve the nomination of Sue Rowe as Vice President. So that's pretty straightforward, 5 resolutions there. And that closes the formal business of this year's AGM. And voting is still open at the moment. So if you haven't voted online yet, you can do so. And that voting will close after my speech. And then the results will be announced a little bit later on in tonight's meeting. So the informal business now begins, and that's a short address by me. So, and I think we're on time at the moment, even possibly slightly ahead of time. So that's good. Hopefully we won't go way over with my speech. So at last year's AGM, I spoke about how the sense of a climate and nature crisis can sometimes seem overwhelming and even slightly depressing for us. And I'd love to report now that there are no massive geopolitical events to make us feel anxious or helpless. Sadly, that's not the case. And I'd love to be able to say that nature's no longer in decline. Of course, we've had a year with more scientific results showing nature's decline in the UK. And we've seen it ourselves this summer with the absence of butterflies and beetles and bees and wasps from our gardens in a very pronounced way. I managed to get stung by 9 wasps last week, which I think is testimony to my nature-friendly garden rather than my own carelessness. But over the past year in my day job writing for The Guardian about environmental issues, I've also seen with my own eyes an astonishing presence, a great abundance of a species that's only emerged in the last few years in an evolutionary blink of an eye. And that species is the nature restoring human being. Okay, it's not really a species, but it's a type of person. And I say this with genuine conviction. I don't think there's ever been a moment in the history of our planet when so many people have cared so deeply for its fate and are now starting to take action to save and restore species other than simply ourselves. You're here tonight because you're all already taking action and you all care, and that's very plain, and we thank you enormously for that, and we thank you for your support for Norfolk Wildlife Trust. And later we'll hear from 2 fantastic inspirational Norfolk farmers who've been taking brilliant action to restore nature on their farms. All year I've seen how desperate people are to take part in this restoration of nature across our country. I'm sure you can ask, I know quite a lot of farmers, and they're always amazed when they put call outs to see if anyone wants to plant a tree on their farm, and loads of people are desperate to get involved and desperate to help. And we, of course, as Norfolk Wildlife Trust, benefit from a huge number of volunteers from that keenness to get involved and take action. I wrote a story back in July for The Guardian about Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire Wildlife Trust trying to raise money to buy a farm called Strawberry Hill that had been accidentally rewilded by a farmer 35 years ago. And it's now a haven for nightingales in particular. And in a flash, word spread after this Guardian story across social media and so on. And BCN Wildlife Trust raised the 1.5 million they needed to secure the whole 350 acres in a couple of weeks, which was amazing. And you can see this public enthusiasm for restoring nature, and you can see how it's enabling wildlife trusts across Britain to really ratchet up their ambition and action. And we see it this September with Cumbria Wildlife Trust's acquisition of Skiddaw, an entire mountain in the Lake District. And again, they were fantastically successful with their public fundraising, where, you know, ordinary, not wealthy people donating small amounts of money because they were so inspired by this vision of nature restoration. And we can see that ratcheting up of ambition in the Wildlife Trust's astonishing acquisition, really, of the 9,500 acre Rothbury estate in Northumberland. That's a rewilding project 3 times the size of the famous Knepp estate down in West Sussex. As our chair, Alice Liddell, will outline in a few moments, we at NWT, I think it looks like we've been absolutely busier than ever with a range of ambitious projects in the last financial year. And our Chief Executive, Elliot, will hopefully give us a hint of the exciting near future in his speech. All I can say is watch this space here in Norfolk. There's a lot of exciting things going on. What can we do as individuals? Well, of course, we can join in with national campaigns and international causes. And there's been a couple of really dynamic nature marches in London recently that have been well supported by conservation NGOs. And as I said last year, I passionately believe that the best antidote to feeling anxious or depressed about the bad, big global news that we face is to take local action and act locally. Acting locally means we protect the places we know and love best, and we link up with like-minded people, we find community, and we see the positive impact of our actions. Watching nature bounce back in our local patch, I mean, that's a great feeling, isn't it? That's a really good feeling. So your support for Norfolk Wildlife Trust is absolutely vital to us, but I hope it's vital in terms of being life affirming for you too. The role of the Norfolk Wildlife Trust president is pretty ornamental. I'm just a glorified volunteer. I don't really do much at all. And given that I'm not the prettiest ornament, I just wanted to share with you a couple of little things that I've been doing for the trust this autumn. If we could have the first slide, please. I think we're going to see a couple of pictures anyway. So the first thing I've been doing begins here on the edge of Foxley Wood. Several key Norfolk Wildlife Trust folk, Kate Aldridge and Nick Atchison, had previously mentioned to me the idea of collecting acorns to grow oaks to mark our centenary in 2026. This is a really big moment. You know, we are the first of the Wildlife Trust, and we're really proud that we'll be the first to reach 100. So I decided to head out to Foxley and see if I could pick up some acorns last month. And NWT's woodland guru, Steve Collin, warned me that there would be almost none because the grey squirrels have eaten most of them. And he was dead right, actually. It was incredibly difficult to find any acorns. But after a long and mostly fruitless search, I finally found some Foxley Edge oaks that the squirrels had somehow missed. Next slide, please. So I ended up collecting this bucket load, and I've planted 220 acorns in pots in my garden. Next slide, please. And so this looks like a very humble operation. It's got a bit bigger since I took that photo, and I've protected them. I've netted them, so hopefully they're protected from squirrels and mice. I'm certainly not counting my acorns before they've sprouted, but check in with me at next year's AGM, and hopefully I might have 100 Foxley oaks ready for us to plant in 2026. That's the aim anyway. I'm also joining an NWT committee where senior members of staff are planning our centenary. And I'd love to hear your ideas as members and NWT staffers as well about how we can best celebrate it, how we can mark it. We want to look back and celebrate what we've done, but we really want to look forwards, don't we? And think about the next 100 years and what legacy we can leave. The other small thing I've done for nature recently, well, it's not really nature, but is to get Norfolk Wildlife Trust into a place where perhaps it's never been before, on the football pitch. Next slide, please. This is Bure Valley Bengals under-13s team. They're a girls' football team, and one of my daughters plays for them. They needed a new kit, so I paid for it, and I put NWT's logo on the front. You probably can't see the logo very clearly in this picture, so here's a picture, next slide please, of Esme, my daughter, modelling the shirt, and there you can see the NWT turn. I must stress, this is something I did off my own bat at no cost to Norfolk Wildlife Trust. It taught me an important lesson, however, and that's that nature has hidden powers. Esme's team have never, to be honest, have never been very good, but with the turn on their shirt for the first time ever in 4 years, they've suddenly won 5 matches in a row. So there you go, the power of nature. They have lost their most recent match, but until that point, they were proudly undefeated in their new shirt. I appreciate that these are small, random seeming connections, actions rather, but there is a connection. Both actions, I hope, are looking positively towards the future. Not everyone's fortunate enough to be able to sponsor a football shirt, of course, but we can all plant an acorn. I've got so much pleasure from planting those acorns, honestly. It's a simple free act that may hopefully continue delivering benefits for people and nature far into the future. As you go about your actions for nature, don't forget though something important, and that's just simply to enjoy our natural world here in Norfolk. Well, obviously the old cliche is we don't protect things we don't love and we don't spend time in, and it's sometimes easy, I find it anyway, easy to sort of forget that we're living in this sensational place. Last month, I took 2 of my kids to Burnham Overy Staithe at dusk to do a Nick Atchison style walk and watch the pink feet fly into roost. Almost none arrived, but we had the most magical experience. And this is my final slide coming up. This is Norfolk. This is our county, a flat place in one of the most nature depleted and most densely populated countries in Europe. Isn't it glorious? Isn't it amazing? Isn't it special? I look at that picture and I get goosebumps every time, like that space, that wilderness where nature and people are in balance. And there's 2 children there racing onwards with their lives. All our children are racing on with their lives, and they deserve a place that is just as special or even more special than the county we know, love, and call home. So hopefully we can all continue to work together to restore nature and keep that place special, but also make it more special. Thank you. So that is the end of my little talk, and we are next. So I should just say that voting is now closing and will have now closed. So I hope you've all I very much hope you've all managed to vote online, and we will have the results in a few minutes. I'm now going to hand over to our brilliant chair, Alice, who is going to tell us all about what NWT has been up to over this past financial year.
Thank you, Patrick. There's a school of thought that we should all strive to become good ancestors, thinking ahead to future generations and leaving our world and its people in a much better state than when we joined it. Patrick, you're clearly already following the doctrine, and your rallying cry to us all does emphasise that. Before I embark on the main theme of my talk, may I pay tribute to a great man, another good ancestor, without whom Norfolk Wildlife Trust would not be the organisation that it is today. I'm talking about Brendan Joyce. In January, we heard the sad news that Brendan had died. Brendan was an exceptional person, a man with a vision. He gave so much to Norfolk's wildlife during over 30 years in conservation. He joined Norfolk Wildlife Trust in 1995 as chief executive and spent 23 years successfully leading it through many changes, challenges, and also celebrations. During his time, Brendan saw membership numbers soar from 15,000 to over 35,000. And under his leadership, thousands of acres of land were brought into active conservation management through acquisitions and restoration projects. In his own words, Brendan also viewed education has the same importance as the land management function, and under his tenure, the scale of workshops, publications, community projects, and work with schools increased considerably. Brendan continues to be remembered with respect and loyalty by members, staff, volunteers, and supporters. He was tireless in his devotion to the wildlife of Norfolk, and as was said at his funeral, many people leave a legacy. Brendan leaves a landscape. So, remembering Brendan with fondness. It's my role to look back over the financial year 2023 to 2024. Here's our impact report. Oh, I can't quite see it on screen. It's called Our Year for Wildlife 2023 to 2024. We call it an impact report for a reason, to demonstrate how we're delivering Norfolk Wildlife Trust's strategy. Our strategy, A Wilder Norfolk for All, was officially launched in September 2023, although we had been working to it for some time. It guides us to 2030 and beyond. We strive to work to the strategy in everything we do. So, for instance, every proposal that comes before the Council of Trustees for consideration is accompanied by a paper stating how the proposal fits with the strategic aim or enables a strategic aim to be delivered. Specifically, the strategy identifies 3 outcomes. First, abundant and thriving nature. Second, people valuing nature. And finally, Norfolk Wildlife Trust being leaders for nature. The goals to achieve the first outcome, abundant and thriving nature, are to improve by increasing the abundance and diversity of wildlife in our land and seas, to expand by creating more space for nature, and to connect by connecting wild spaces for nature's recovery. Just a few of the highlights for the year. Spoonbills bred at Hickling for the first time in about 400 years. New habitat was created for specialist Brex flora, and this year saw a substantial increase in the natterjack toad population at Siderstone Common. And how do we achieve highlights like this? There are tons of examples, but some of them are the work we've done at Thompson Common to turn agricultural land into nature-rich habitat, particularly with the restoration of pingos for northern pool frogs and other rare wildlife. The adaptation of our Clyde Reserve to mitigate the effect of a changing climate by realigning and restoring the new cut, which is a hugely deep drain, to counteract shingle movement and postpone the ingress of salt water into our freshwater habitats. The improvement to wetlands near King's Lynn and the restoration of Norfolk's precious peatlands alongside the Fens East Peat Partnership. Various work to restore and connect priority habitats. We offered advice on 61 county wildlife sites, resurveyed 60 grassland sites, restored meadows, fens and ponds as part of our Network for Nature project, worked with the County Council to protect 120 roadside nature reserves, and are returning agricultural land to woodland at Foxley, helped by Patrick by planting his acorns. The second outcome of our strategy is to see people valuing nature so that they are connected to, inspired by, and take action for it. We aim to break down barriers and allow people to take more action. We aim to grow a movement of active wildlife supporters, and we aim to enable meaningful connections for people and nature. There are all sorts of ways we address this. For instance, we launched a pilot initiative, Wilder Schools, to facilitate the use of school grounds for wildlife learning and well-being. We have a Wilder Warden scheme for younger people aged between 11 to 25. Nearly 300 people have attended one of our 20 sessions of our Wilder Communities workshops, a scheme which is now in its third year. Our Next Door Nature programme continues to demonstrate the value of empowering communities to make changes where they live or work. And one of our flagship projects has been Sweetbriar Marshes. I'll talk about that a bit more later. For instance, since opening, we've held over 50 events on site. Another flagship project, with more to come, involves our vision for Hickling. In October last year, we brought the pleasure boat in to develop our vision for the area's wildlife and people. The pub provides us with an opportunity to create new ways to introduce people to nature and the precious Broads landscape. In all, we connected over 11,000 children and young people on our reserves or elsewhere. We benefited from 2,000 hours of conservation work from 380 volunteers, work for which we're very grateful, and we ran 37 churchyard nature activities. And at the close of the year, there were 37,905 members of Norfolk Wildlife Trust, the highest it had ever been. If that doesn't demonstrate that people value nature, you members value nature, I don't know what does. Our third outcome is to see Norfolk Wildlife Trust being leaders for nature, ensuring that we are an influential, resilient and a collaborative organisation. We strive to build on our foundations and systems to enable success, scale up to be strong and influential, and empower leadership and collaboration. Some of the foundational work is inward facing, inevitably. For instance, we've installed a new finance system. We've reviewed our pay structure in a positive step to ensure people are paid fairly and we can attract talent. We've formed an EDI, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Working Group, and we've instituted a staff forum. But obviously, we must look outwards as well. You'll have noticed that we have a new website, which we hope is easier to use. You'll be aware of our campaign against the proposed Norwich Western Link Road, which threatens the largest UK population of barbastelle bats, as well as ancient woodland and other wildlife. Our collaborative approach is epitomised by the project at Sweetbriar Marshes. We're very proud of it, but we're also very proud of the input we've had from the huge number of local communities and members who we asked what they wanted to see in a Norwich nature reserve. We listened to some 1,000 people. We shared our vision with Aviva, major donors, Norwich City Council and the Greater Norwich Growth Board, receiving positive responses. And now Norfolk and Norwich Naturalist Society is conducting monitoring work over a 2-year period. And collaboration doesn't stop there. We work with landowners, councils, other bodies such as the Norfolk and Norwich Festival, who also played a part in Sweetbriar Marshes in May this year, as well as the wider Wildlife Trust movement. A key feature of being resilient is, of course, making sure our financial position is strong. Lindsay has outlined where we are, and it is indeed strong. We're so fortunate in having the support of so many members and of so many corporate supporters. We never take you for granted. From over 90 investors in wildlife to major sponsors for projects, the commercial sector contributes hugely to the success of our work. We're also very grateful to those who leave money to NWT, to the Trust in their wills or to make donations. To summarise, all I've said so far hopefully shows you what an impact we are making and how we too are striving to be good ancestors. I'm coming to the end, but I've left the most important bit till last. I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you to all our members, donors, supporters, investors, grant providers, all our volunteers, ambassadors, vice presidents, and all those other organisations who work with us. And an overwhelming thank you to the whole of the expert, dedicated staff within Norfolk Wildlife Trust. I hope you know what a positive difference each one of you makes to our work and towards realising our vision and aims. We are very grateful. I'm now going to hand over to Elliot, who will outline what else is to come to deliver a wilder Norfolk for all.
Thank you, Alice, and good evening, everyone. My name's Elliot Lyne. I'm the Chief Executive of Norfolk Wildlife Trust. And as I think I'd like to do each year, I'd just like to pay tribute and thanks to Alice, our chair, and to our entire trustee board. It's Trustees Week this week, and without the dedication and commitment and wisdom of our trustees, we wouldn't be where we are, and we wouldn't be making some of the bold and sometimes difficult decisions that we do. So I'm sure you'll agree we've got a fantastic trustee board, augmented this evening by some great new candidates, and we look forward to working with them. So my talk will focus on looking forwards, and I top and tail it actually with some delightful images from our 2025 calendar. So at a Norfolk Wildlife Trust centre near you, you can pick up the 2025 calendar, an ideal Christmas present for, and bulk discounts. I'm not sure if they're available, but they may well be. But there's some fantastic images sourced from members and other supporters entirely. And this is one of them, a fantastic image to start with. So last year I outlined our new strategy, which we had just launched at the time, and 2023-24 was the first full year in delivery of that strategy. And Alice has outlined some of the amazing achievements that we've been made. I mentioned last year that the challenge we face is grave and serious, and Patrick has outlined some of those challenges very well, more eloquently than I could possibly do. And many of you here tonight will understand that, and will also understand why, in response to that, we need to take bold and innovative action, some of which entails additional risk, which in itself often leads to greater opportunity for nature. And none of this happens overnight. And it takes time to change our ways of working, to transform our approach and the organisation. And Alice has outlined some of the ways that we've been doing that. But we're very careful to preserve and build on our heritage, the things we're good at, our core activities, and add to this with new approaches and innovative ideas. As Patrick said, the world we live in is becoming more uncertain. This week's US presidential election result will create more challenge in our collective response to the climate and nature crisis, for example. But we have to and must remain focused and positive, and really focused on the long game. The climate transition is underway. It's baked into many economic expectations, our economy, and we must ensure that we continue to work with business in particular to drive nature markets forwards, regardless of short-term government volatility. So I'm going to outline some of the highlights from the first outcome, abundant and thriving nature, and then the other outcomes, the highlights to come, if you like, or things we've done in the subsequent months since the end of last financial year. We continue to manage our nature reserves as we have done for the last 98 years and will continue to do. We're challenging ourselves, though, about how we are doing this. And one thing I'd like to highlight is our monitoring framework, which is starting to gather pace and is a really exciting development. So this slide just has some pictures from the details of the monitoring framework. We've got, some really comprehensive guidance on the whole framework, on individual species. We're using new technologies, drone technologies, thermal imaging technologies, precise GPS technologies, visitor counters, and new mapping technologies to really understand what is the difference we're making, what is the difference that you, our members, are investing in, are paying for, are supporting us with. And that has yet to generate exciting results, because these things take time, and the picture of nature will emerge over time. But there's been some fantastic work done already in the nature conservation team led by Kevin Hart, and we're delighted that we're really taking this kind of approach, which will enable us to evidence the impact to our members and supporters. In terms of creating more space for nature, we're delighted that we've recently completed the purchase of an additional 28 hectares, adjacent to Foxley Wood, thus increasing the size of the wood by up to 20%. Plenty of space for Patrick to plant some of those oaks, I feel. And we're in advanced negotiations on 2 other land parcels in other areas around the county, totaling some additional 50 hectares. And we're also in negotiations on our first funding packages around new green finance markets. We're starting to build momentum with our work in the wider countryside as well, and we'll be looking at an exciting range of new projects around particularly pond and meadow restoration, together with building on our recent work in the Claylands area of South Norfolk. So moving on to outcome 2, people valuing nature. And Alice has already spoken to some of these things, but I'll update with some new activities. I've been really delighted with our progress so far in the current financial year and are really excited by the plans beyond. As Alice said, the first step in ensuring that people value nature is to widen access. And as Patrick said, if we don't widen access, then people don't get to experience nature, and if they don't experience it, they don't start to love it, and if they don't start to love it, they won't take action. So it's really, our approach here is really based on some solid science about how you get people to take action for nature. Our acquisition of the Pleasure Boat Inn was specifically designed to do this, and early signs are very, very encouraging. We purchased the land and buildings last year, and this was a strategic acquisition which really complements our purchase of the wider Hickling estate in 2017. We renovated the building this year in 24/5, and it opened in August, taking advantage of the summer trade. This acquisition was really key to unlocking the wider investment that is planned at Hickling over the coming 5 to 10 years, which aims to enhance the whole of the Upper Thurn landscape for nature, working with farmers and landowners, and enhance the visitor experience and deliver sustainable local livelihoods and financial return to the trust from our assets. As Alice said, we're also breaking down barriers to nature with our work at Sweetbriar Marshes, and we continue to do so. We're particularly focused on enabling greater access for people with mobility and other impairments. And we're following this up with an accessibility review of our entire nature reserves portfolio, which will allow us to understand where paths in particular are accessible and where they're not, and therefore allow us to prioritise investment in the areas with the greatest benefit. And in particular, give tools to those with mobility impairments for them to understand where they can access. We also did our first ever audience research last year, which gave us a huge insight into who our current audience is, in particular, you, our members. And this year, we're following this up with a more forward-looking piece of work, which aims to help us understand how we can broaden our reach and strengthen and deepen our engagement with current audiences, but also attract new audiences to Norfolk Wildlife Trust. In terms of becoming a leader for nature, some of this work is progressing, as Alice has said, and some of it is in its infancy. We've progressed well, as you've heard, about building our foundations, new finance system, new website. We're also planning a major modernisation of our server and online filing IT systems. All pretty boring things, you might think, not at all sexy for funders. Absolutely essential for keeping us effective and efficient, and really taking away some of those pain points for our staff, who can get very frustrated when things don't work, as I'm sure we all do. But building on our foundations, we are scaling up to be strong, influential and resilient. And we've put some effort this year into creating a general election campaign and connecting with prospective parliamentary candidates, and have continued to build relationships with new MPs post-election in what is a very different political landscape in Norfolk. We're in the process of building an internal advisory offer, which will better allow us to provide advice to farmers and landowners in particular across all disciplines within the trust. And I'll say more about this later on. Through all of this, as Alice has said, our financials are strong and being well managed. Finally, although slower to get going than we might have liked, we are starting to build important relationships with major corporates, MPs, local authorities and opinion formers outside our maybe rather narrow previous confines. It's important that we build consensus with key decision makers within Norfolk and beyond about the importance of nature for its own sake and for our future prosperity, health and happiness. But although we are making huge progress, we are not yet winning. And why do I say this? Because what we want to achieve, nature's recovery, is not yet fully showing through in the data, although encouraging signs for there. And Patrick has outlined some anecdotal evidence from this year where we are showing the real lack of pollinators in the landscape. So what I really want to talk about for the rest of this talk is how we can really build a consensus and some shifts I think we all need to make in how to bring nature back to Norfolk. I think we really can find a new way to work differently together. And we can do this by harnessing the best that Norfolk has to offer and to really take a national leadership position in nature's recovery. So I think we all need to continue to believe that it's possible to turn the tide and create both sustainable farm and rural businesses and nature's recovery at the same time. And I hope you'll hear from some of our fantastic panelists later on about how they've been able to do that. Next slide, please. And the first, so I'm going to talk about 4 big shifts that I think we need to make to make this a reality. First, we need to embrace what is known as triple bottom line thinking, where people, prosperity, and planet come together, leading to sustainable outcomes. And this slide starts to talk about some of the things that we want to pull together. There's a lot of, in the top left corner, strategies which have been produced about economics of biodiversity, a national food strategy, lots of work that the wildlife trusts have been doing, and they feel like disparate things at the moment. I think we need to pull that together. And at the bottom there, really create a vibrant mixed rural economy, which not only optimizes nature-friendly food production, but brings in nature-based tourism. It creates recreation opportunities. It builds in economic opportunities for landowners around ecosystem services, biodiversity markets, carbon markets, those kind of things, but also creates good jobs and good skills in local economies. If we start to think in a more holistic way, I think we can really drive nature's recovery and other economic and social outcomes. Next slide, please. And second, maybe controversially, I think we need to create fewer projects, but more programs. This slide just highlights a very few of the amazing projects and funding opportunities that we have on the left-hand side. And by no means am I saying that these are bad, but sometimes it feels as though we have a jigsaw puzzle with some missing pieces because we have a bit of funding here and a bit of funding there. I think what we need to do at a more holistic level is to create coordinated programs for nature's recovery in Norfolk. And the local nature recovery strategies, the LNRS, which is coming soon, which Norfolk County Council are leading on, could perhaps provide the missing pieces to that jigsaw puzzle and provide that county-wide coherence. Next slide, please. And I think probably not very controversially, we're saying that we need to grow out from our nature reserves. We have some of the most amazing places in Norfolk. So rather flippantly on the left-hand side, I've put a picture of Hethel Oldthorne, which I think is probably the UK's smallest nature reserve. But actually, increasingly, we find that our nature reserves are delivering fantastic results for biodiversity, but they may be very isolated in the landscape. So we need to take the amazing work that we do and firstly make those places the best they can be. But then we need to use them as the arc, the source, the wellspring of a new landscape scale approach to bringing nature back, which is rooted and based in all of our communities, our farms, our companies, schools and towns, the length and breadth of Norfolk. And finally, we can't do this on our own. And this slide just highlights some of the amazing activities that are going on in Norfolk and opportunities for collaboration. We must create and build new relationships and partnerships. We have a huge range of active organisations around nature. I think we probably have the highest concentration of the government's landscape recovery projects. That's the higher tier of the agri-environment projects in the whole of England. We've got 4.5 of those currently in Norfolk, with a third round still to come. And the inaugural Norfolk Landscapes Conference, which we supported in October, had over 300 attendees and was testament to that energy and enthusiasm. And to pull all that together, to create the best opportunities for the Trust in doing that, we are in the middle at the early stages probably of creating a new advisory offer. So this will make us as best placed as possible to succeed. What this will do is enable us to bring in an integrated way all of the amazing skills in our incredible teams across our nature reserves, our wider countryside teams, our engagement teams, our amazing ecological consultancy and beyond. We need to bring all of those skills to offer those to potential farmers and landowners, because actually what we're increasingly seeing is farmers and landowners coming to us and wanting a sort of bespoke turnkey package that does everything from the design of a scheme to the monitoring of that scheme to the management of that scheme over time. So we think we're really well placed to bring those skills to the market, and we're currently creating that offer in the organisation, as well as adding new capacity in marine, rivers and catchments, and campaigning. So finally, and another slide from our calendar for 2025 to finish without the thank you bubble on my mind. We think we have far more opportunities that we can possibly respond to, which in a way is a great sign that nature's recovery is being taken seriously and the tide of history, the thrust of policy has turned in our favour. But it is frustrating to all of us that we're not able to do more. But we are hugely thankful, though, with the support that we currently have from you, our members and supporters. I can now report that we are above 39,000 members and rapidly approaching 40,000 members. I know that we, together with others, can turn the corner for nature's recovery in Norfolk and create a county, as Patrick has so eloquently identified, where nature is abundant and thriving and valued. And who knows, maybe we need to say move over the Canaries and we're now going to be powering the football teams with little terns. But anyway, together we can do this, but we need your continued support and that of many others to join us on that journey. And I'd like to close by really thanking you for being here tonight. And just to mention, we've had over 1,000 votes, I think, even before the meeting, which is testament to the fact that we're trying to be as open and democratic as possible in this. So we've got great engagement from our members in the activities of the Trust, and we want to continue that along into the future. So I'll now close by thanking you and handing back to Patrick. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elliot. Thank you for that inspiring and also very detailed address. It was great to hear. So now the results of the voting, I'm going to read them out. They've come through hot off the press on my phone, such is modern technology. So resolution 1, which was to confirm the minutes of the annual general meeting held last year. We have votes for 915, votes against 3, 111 abstentions, total votes 1,029. Thank you very much for voting. Just to repeat, all these votes will be published with the details of the online postal and in-meeting breakdown on our website as well. So, resolution 2, to receive the report of council and approve the report and audited financial statements for the year ending 31st of March 2024. We have votes for 149, votes against 7, and 72 abstentions, and a total number of votes 1,028 there. So obviously both those first two have very clearly been passed. Resolution 3 is to reappoint Lovewell Blake as the Trust's auditors and authorise council to determine their remuneration. We have votes for 969, votes against 12, and 50 abstentions. So that is obviously passed as well. Resolution 4 was to elect and re-elect members of Council of Trustees. And I will read out now the votes for. We have Glenn Houchell, who is re-elected with 998 votes. Harry Buskell is elected with 998 votes. Richard Carter is elected with 990 votes. Richard Powell is elected with 998 votes once again. And Bailey Tate is elected with 998 votes. Thank you very much, and congratulations to Glenn, who's re-elected, and our new trustees, Harry, Richard, and Bailey. Item 5, Resolution 5, is to approve the nomination of Sue Rowe as Vice President. And we have votes for 973, votes against 10, and 40 abstentions. So Sue is a new Vice President. Congratulations, Sue. That's great news. So that takes us through all the voting. And just to repeat, all those results in full are published on our website. We are running slightly behind. I don't want to say the tea break is cancelled just yet, but we will press on as quickly as we can. And next up is no Norfolk Wildlife Trust AGM would be complete without our wonderful Ambassador Nick Atchison. And Nick introduces a film which reveals the winner of this year's Sydney Long Medal. It goes. I don't think I'm scooping any Nick to reveal that it goes to our fantastic friend of Norfolk Wildlife Trust and brilliant scientist, Dr. Anne Edwards. Here is Nick's film.
Dr. Sydney Long was a physician working at the Norfolk and Norwich and Jenny Lind hospitals in Norwich. But his heart lay in the natural world. He was for many years a leading light of Norfolk and Norwich Naturalist Society, and he led the foundation of Norfolk Naturalist Trust, which today we know as Norfolk Wildlife Trust. Every 2 years, Norfolk Wildlife Trust and the Norfolk and Norwich Naturalists come together to award the Sydney Long Memorial Medal in his memory. And this year's recipient is Dr. Anne Edwards. Anne, what an amazing ancient coppice.
It's fabulous, isn't it?
It's just beautiful. I reckon that the last time it was cut was probably a century ago, but by the width of the stool, it's much, much older than that as a tree.
We're looking at 600, 700 years old for this stool.
And we've come to Ashwellthorpe Lower Wood, which in many ways has been the focus of your action for conservation in Norfolk over more than 30 years.
Yes, since the early 90s. Yeah.
And you bring together a team of volunteers to coppice. What's the physical work involved and what's the benefit for wildlife?
Coppicing is an ancient form of forest management whereby you cut down blocks of trees to the ground and let it reshoot as multiple trunks. Originally that was done to provide a continuous source of materials for fuel or building, but it does have benefits for wildlife because cutting down a block of trees lets in sunlight to the woodland floor and allowing plants to grow up. And some of the really old plants that we have, ancient plant species we have in the wood, are completely dependent on coppicing. Now, if we stopped coppicing, they would die out. And those plants, they tend to flower quite early in the spring and they attract early pollen providers for insects. And yeah, the insects attract birds and so on. So yeah.
And how much of your year do you spend coppicing and getting together teams of coppicers?
Yeah, we start in October, beginning of October, and we go through mid-March, end of March sometimes. If you'd asked me that 15 years ago, I would have said we go through till April, but with climate change, spring is coming earlier and earlier. So we stop when the birds start to nest and the ground flora starts peeping through.
What a display of King Alfred's cakes.
Yeah, they sniff out a dying ash and recycle it.
And in Ashwellthorpe, where better than to see King Alfred's cakes? In addition to all of the effort that you've put into conservation for Norfolk Wildlife Trust here at Ashwellthorpe and also at Hethel Old Thorn, what's been your relationship with Wyndham Nature Group and with the Norfolk and Norwich Naturalist Society?
The Wyndham Nature Group, a lot of volunteers come out to help on a Sunday afternoon. We record the species in the wood. We put together a book about the history and the wildlife of the wood. We enjoy our wildlife, we share stories, we send in our records to the Norfolk Naturalist Trust.
And you've contributed as an officer for many years to both organisations.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I'm currently co-chair of the Nature Group and I do coordinate the volunteers here and at Hesselthorne, and I've been on the research committee for the Norfolk Naturalist Society.
And Anne, in your more than 30 years of volunteering for Norfolk Wildlife Trust for Nature in Norfolk, what have been your particular highlights, things that have filled your heart with joy?
One of the things is the return of 2 butterflies to Ashwellthorpe Wood. 2018 we saw the return of the silver-washed fritillary, and now there's a quite decent population here. And in 2019 the purple emperor came back, and seeing those big butterflies gliding around and the sunny rides, that fills my heart with joy. But every time I come in here I'll find something new that I haven't seen before, something that I don't know what it is, and there's always something new to discover.
As a naturalist, your discovery is never done.
That's right. Absolutely, yes.
Dr. Anne Edwards, on behalf of Norfolk and Norwich Naturalist Society and Norfolk Wildlife Trust, and I feel sure on behalf of Dr. Sidney Long himself, congratulations on receiving the Sidney Long Memorial Medal.
Thank you very much indeed. We have an amazing team of volunteers. Everybody gives their time up to help with the conservation work and maintain the wood. I hope Sidney Long would be very impressed with Ashwellthorpe Wood, about the huge biodiversity we have here and the enthusiastic group of volunteers who want to preserve the wood for future generations.
Oh, what a lovely film. And congratulations, Anne, who is an inspirational example of someone who's a brilliant scientist and a volunteer and taking action and doing all that work for nature and in Norfolk over so many years. We're now going to move straight on to questions, and I'm going to read out the questions which have come in via the AGM postal ballot papers. We have got this Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I don't see any questions at all in it yet, but there is an opportunity tonight. If you've got any burning questions, please do whack them into that Q&A box and we will answer them. There's a couple of fairly hard-hitting questions coming up in a minute or two. This is the first question anyway. Sweetbriar Marshes, it would be nice to know more about the cattle. Assume White Park cattle with bull, Dexter's Belted Galloway by gate. Also, this questioner is asking about info regarding birds and loos. And I think Elliot can answer that one.
Yes, thank you. We have British whites on the Sweetbriar Marshes. So we have a herd of British white cattle anyway in the trust, and we've carefully selected, I think we've got 6 cattle on there at the moment, which graze the reserve, and we're making sure that we've only got animals with good temperament present on the site. And we don't place bulls on the site where there's any public access, so there's not going to be a bull on Sweetbriar. We've got a full suite of monitoring in place, and a breeded bird survey is conducted each year. And we've got an urban nature reserves manager and assistant there as well. And obviously you can contact Matt Wickens, who's that person to find out the recent records of species using the reserve. I have to say, whenever I've been to Sweetbriar, the cattle are the thing which seems to attract lots of people who try and find the cattle and are really interested in where they are. So it's a really important part of the conservation side. It enables us to tell that story about how conservation happens on that kind of site. In terms of the important aspects like toilets, we really, part of our vision is to make this an accessible and inclusive place. So we really want to welcome school groups to the site, and so obviously we need to have toilets. And so we're currently exploring possible sites for a particularly accessible changing places toilet, as well as ordinary toilets and accessible car parking spaces. That won't be on the reserve itself, but we're looking at adjacent or nearby land, and we're in discussions on a few areas at the moment, which will enable particularly those with mobility or other needs and young children to have easy access. That's my answer to that one. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Elliot. Right, next question that came in with the postal ballot papers, and as new members, we were concerned that the nominations group only selected 5 candidates out of 15 for 5 seats. We felt disenfranchised. I understand that 10 people rejected. The 10 people who were rejected did not want to stand independently. It feels a foregone conclusion. How is this the best democratic process? And I think Alice is up for answering that one.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. And I just want to say that the 10 people weren't rejected. It was a question of choosing from a really good set of candidates who were the 5 we were recommending at the time. And as I outlined before Patrick read out resolutions 4 and 5, in the past couple of years, we've improved our trustee recruitment process and have advertised more widely than ever before. This has brought in a greater number of candidates, and the new process allows the current board of trustees to review their own skills against those that are required over the coming years. For instance, we do an annual self-assessment of the board, and each trustee does a skills audit every year, and we look ahead to work out what's needed depending on what the trust is doing at the time, who has to retire, who may not be standing for re-election, etc. So for instance, I have to stand down as a trustee next year because I will have done 9 years, and we will be looking for someone with a legal background because that's my background. I do agree that this year it may seem peculiar that we're asking members to choose up to 5 people from a selection of 5, but the 5 recommended did represent the best balance of skills and experience for the Council of Trustees looking forward to the next year or so. And it's just the way that things turned out this year, and it may be different in future years. Under our Articles of Association, our constitution, if you like, we do have to ask members to vote on all resolutions, and we're very glad that you have. Those people who were unsuccessful in making this year's list of the nominations group preferred candidates were invited to stand, but decided not to do so. It doesn't prevent them, or indeed any other member, from applying in future years, and indeed we welcome as many applications as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. We've got quite a detailed question here. I believe the answer to this is going to be really long. Can I ask, Elliot, when you answer this question, can you try and keep the answer as short as possible?
Yeah.
Because we are overrunning, and I want to try and give people 5 minutes to have a break, and I don't want to cut into Helen and our brilliant farmers' time. They're going to be on at 7:20. So this question is, how much money was spent to refurbish the failing pub at Hickling? No mention of this in last year's accounts. I guess full expenditure is hidden in current assets or other expenditure. It was never divulged on the press releases. Meanwhile, my local Holme Dunes Reserve lacked the funds for 2 years to have a reliable working ATV until this April. Hickling pub project not mentioned at all in the 23-24 or 22-23 impact report. Why not? So that's a critical question there from one of our members. Elliot, over to you.
Thank you.
Answer by 7:15, that would be great, and then we can.
I will absolutely do that. So it's there's lots in there. I think the first thing is the notion that we have a failing pub. I think it's very successful so far. I've explained, I think, why we've invested in it. We tried to take bold action to introduce new people to nature. Lindsay presented how much we'd spent on the pub. That was £680,000. It was in that slide, and we've since spent around about 350,000 to refurbish it in this financial year. So we've bought an asset and some land, which really opens up the opportunities in the rest of Hickling. It opens up the opportunities strategically, and it provides a financial return for the trust. So that's the justification. There's nothing hidden. And that has been mentioned and will be mentioned. It was in the 23-24 impact report, and it will be mentioned obviously in the 24-25 impact report. And we're very proud of what we've achieved with this. As regards the issue with Holme Dunes, we operate a process with our capital expenditure of in our budget process of identifying the key needs and identifying where we can secure funding. We didn't have a situation where Home Dunes was without a vehicle. There was a UTV, which is the sort of I don't actually know what it stands for. It's like an ATV but slightly different, which is used for patrolling the beach at home. It broke down, and we borrowed one from Cly. We provided another vehicle. Not the most ideal solution, but there was a vehicle available at all times. And we have since secured the funding through a funding bid for a new vehicle, which is deployed at the moment. The critical thing here is we decided not to purchase a diesel vehicle. We wanted to try and afford an electric vehicle, because when we have changes in our fleet, we're now moving to an electric vehicle fleet. Can't do that in all places because our reserve vehicles don't have the vehicles don't have the torque at the moment. But for all-terrain vehicles and road vehicles, we can. They cost more money. We needed to secure some funding. We did that, and now there's a vehicle there. So I hope that answers the question, and I'll leave it there, I think, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Elliot. I'm just looking in the Q&A box, and there is nothing in there. This is sort of by the by, really, but the pub at Hickling is going really, really well. And my wife actually knows the general manager, and she was saying that it's been way above their expectations in terms of the people using the pub and enjoying it, and it's got locals as well as visitors, and NWT is absolutely front and center within the pub, so it's got off to a brilliant start. That's just an observation, but right, so we have got to 7:15. We've got 5 minutes for everyone to run and make a cup of tea, cup of coffee. Do come back here at 7:20, please, sharp, and we will begin the highlight of the evening, which is Helen Bonchkovka talking to two brilliant farmers, Ollie Birkbeck and Stuart Mayhew, from West Norfolk and South Norfolk, who are doing amazing things on their farms. I've met both farmers before, and they're inspirational. So come back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all managed to get a break and get a drink and a cup of tea. So on to the highlight of tonight, undoubtedly, which is a discussion with two brilliant farmers from Norfolk, Ollie Birkbecker, who's over in West Norfolk, and Stuart Mayhew, who's down at Old Hall Farm in South Norfolk on the Claylands. And Norfolk Wildlife Trust Senior Nature Recovery Manager Helen Bonchkovka is going to introduce them more fully and chair a discussion with them, and hopefully we can all learn about their brilliant work with growing food and restoring nature in Norfolk.
Thank you, Patrick. That's great. One of the absolutely best bits about working for Norfolk Wildlife Trust is the opportunity to meet what Patrick has called, nature recovery human species, nature restoring human species, and to see their work across the county. It really is a great privilege to see that. And when you see this work, you become aware of the huge sort of range of efforts people are making, from community groups trying to do what they can in their spaces, often in really small spaces, through to huge estates, and even now those estates joining together to form nature recovery, landscape recovery projects. So action to restore nature is being taken at so many scales. And I think the two speakers we've got tonight, Stuart and Ollie, really speak to that. Very often, these actions require big, bold, often even risky steps. And I think we'll hear a little bit about that as they speak. So Stuart's farm is actually not far from where I live in the South Norfolk Claylands, and I very much enjoy visiting there. Ollie's I visited not long ago to look at some really great meadow restoration projects, so I know both projects quite well. I'll leave them to talk about their own land and what they're doing there. And I think, Patrick, you're going to keep an eye on the Q&A box, so if people want to ask questions, we can sort of field those later on. So Ollie, would you like to kick us off with telling us about your land and what you're doing?
Sure. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, I mean, it's terrifying to be described as a highlight by a superstar like Patrick, but I'll do what you've asked me to do, which is to talk a little bit about what we do, why we've changed the way we do it, and what changes we've seen as a result, and how the hell do we make it work financially, which is a big point. We're 2,000 acres, give or take, 50% of which is the usual arable rotation, and the other 50% of which is about nature restoration, which on the fairly light and rubbish land that we've got is a pretty healthy, and a long time ago more traditional percentage. We also do various bits and bobs like glamping and weddings, and get the occasional high roller who might drift through and want to stay in the house for a few quid. But it's pretty tight. The finances are tight, and it's a difficult job to keep one's neck above water quite a lot of the time. The arable is now farmed along regenerative principles since I came here about 8 years ago, which is cover crops, no pesticides ever, no till or min-till, and this patchwork quilt approach to farming, as opposed to huge 200-acre blocks of oilseed rape, which any self-respecting flea beetle could see from the moon, and you get the insects you deserve after all. Everything is for human consumption, bigger hedges, smaller fields, and a bit of agroforestry, which we're just starting out on, which is the idea of farming in 35-meter corridors between strips of trees and scrub and flowers. I planted 5,000 hazel saplings the other day with my own fair hands, only to see about 60% of them getting eaten immediately by every muntjac and hare in the region. Furthermore, it's very hard to see any immediate benefit out of these sort of interventions, because it doesn't really change the yield. Like we know with all these things, we're only just starting to see what the ravages of the way we farmed in the 70s and 80s has done to the insect count in the natural world generally, which we didn't see at first. And so we can only hope that 10 years, 20 years down the line, we'll start to see the advantages of the way we're farming now. And we just have to hold the bloody line, which is what's so difficult, because you have to get out of bed a bit earlier. And then there's the nature recovery side of it. I inherited Massingham, as it's called, from my aunt, who was a cartoon character, sort of hare coursing, fox hunting battle axe, who you all would have hated, and she would have hated you. But she was sort of, in the way, she was an old-fashioned sporting naturalist. She knew how many yellow hammers we had, how many partridges we had. She wanted the hedges cut late and conservatively. She wanted overwintered stubbles, and if anyone screwed it up, then woe betide them. She wasn't the sort of romantic, lovey-dovey, nature-loving people like we are today. So I took over from someone who did care, but in a very different way that we do today. For me, it was a very different story. I'd come from a wildly different lifestyle in the Middle East, running around the desert, doing private security for the Americans and things. And I wanted to be, the only way I could hack it here really is by some sort of deeper immersion, a slightly more romantic immersion into the landscape that I lived and breathed, and to actually feel part of it myself. And if I hadn't done it that way, I'd have probably screwed it up, and it wouldn't have worked. So I was after a deeper integration with the landscape that I was going to become part of, having been fairly bored of the desert after about 6 years of that. So to cut a long story short, I replaced our classic spray and drill and plough farm contractors with a young regeneratively minded fella called Rob Scott, who's doing an absolute sterling job of farming in a different way. And then I phoned up my now friend John Ebbidge of Natural England and said, how the heck could we restore Massingham Heath, which was a victim of the good old Second World War Dig for Victory campaign, where all the sort of great last swathes of natural wilderness were ploughed up for the war effort. And it's had 80 years worth of rubbish sugar beet on it ever since, which you could only make a living out of by declaring chemical Armageddon on it and taking a healthy subsidy from the taxpayer. So we reversed all that. We planted 100 different seed varieties. We put 10 miles of fencing around it. We bought a whole load of goats, pigs, horses, etc., and turn it into the diverse wilderness that it is today. And it was only during that long process that I actually personally became enchanted by the whole thing. And I fell in love with the natural world in a way that I hadn't been before. And I came to realize that the sort of dormant connection, the dormant human connection with nature that I think we used to feel and that has gone away, can be restored if only one stops for a minute, looks around, and tries to work out what's going on around you. And then all the myriad fragments of lace that make up the technicolored dream coat that is Mother Nature present themselves to you. And it's been a rather wonderful process for me, and I've since become somewhat obsessive about the whole thing, which is kind of where my little adventure with Wild East came in, which was conceived on about my 6th pint in the pub with 2 other farmers who were also interested in the concept of not only nature-friendly farming, but how can we restore nature as a society? How can we know how to fix it unless we know what it is and why it's broken? And so we had this whole mantra of everyone, everywhere, and schoolyards, churchyards, farmyards, prison yards, hospital car parks. And then we had this rather corny map of dreams, which was the visual representation of our progress, a little bit like the church roof fund, which showed us how many acres we were as a society managing to restore to natural habitat. And we thought we needed about, back of a fag packet, 20% of our 250,000 hectares of the region. And I know that the Wildlife Trust is now completely aligned to that. So back here, after all that work, which I just described on the heath, we've seen extraordinary progress. Really, the wildlife has quadrupled. We've got quail, turtle doves, woodlarks, yellowhammers galore, skylarks like you wouldn't believe, screaming above my head all year round. And it's been truly transformative, both for me and for the society that I live in, because the locals, who were very skeptical at first, sorry, my screen's wobbling around, and were sort of fairly en couleur about where the hell am I going to park my car because your bloody fence is in the way, and where are we going to get our food from, which is too complex an argument to dip into now. This mad idea of food security on weak land, but the result of this has been that everyone talks about, there's a sense of possession has developed, or ownership has developed in the village and the pubs, and everyone talks about it. And we had this ridiculous thing recently where we just cultivated a bit of rubbish land and did nothing with it, and as a result it got covered in 500 acres of poppies, which were all over the news in America, and people were turning up from 4 corners of the country to take photographs of each other running through it. And it was really extraordinary to see how the human connection with the natural world was reborn, just in the most sort of simple way, really. And now we're going gangbusters on this sort of thing, and everyone's involved, and they hated it at first and they love it now, after all those sort of hopeless years of bloody old sugar beet. We've got an abundance of you know, we've had people like you, Helen, and Nick Atchison have been coming along and teaching me a little bit more than I knew about the sort of plants that are coming now. It's become dynamic, and there are lots of lovely things coming which weren't invited to come, which tells me that it's building resilience, and it's actually starting to work of its own accord. And it gives me and everyone around such joy to look out of the window and see it happening. There's evidence on the agricultural side that the natural pests that live in the bits of natural habitat that we've allowed to come are making a material difference to our yield, seeing as we don't spray pesticides, specifically with oilseed rape along the margins. The sort of parasitic wasps and lacewings and ladybirds have worked their magic and made a great difference. And I think that can only build when we start to really get into this idea of agroforestry in those narrow strips. You know, saying that, the whole thing will be a bloody disaster next year, but you've got to try. Cover crops are proving wonderful. Everyone's doing cover crops now. There's nothing sort of new and brave about cover. Even people who aren't getting paid for it are doing it because it structures soil, it prevents runoff, it houses pollinators and all the rest of it. No brown soil ever again, really, for more than a few days. The yields have unchanged. I mean, weirdly enough, that's a good thing in a way that the yields haven't changed, because usually with this sort of regenerative journey, your yields go downhill fairly quickly before they start to build up again. And we've seen not really much of a change. And finally, how do we pay for it? It's always a struggle. There's a combination of country stewardship scheme, CSS, and SFI, both of which actually pay almost about 100 quid per acre less than a normal farming year would produce, which is absolutely amazing. And the double benefit of that, of course, is you haven't got the monkey on your back as to whether you're going to have a rubbish year or not, because as long as you do what you're meant to be doing, you're going to get paid anyway. And so SFI now, the sustainable farming incentive, is starting to replace certain sort of spring crops or, you know, maize or pigs or whatever it might be that you need as a break crop, and being used actually within the rotation in an intelligent way, which is very interesting, and a complete change in the way that farming is done as a result of all these government interventions. And the CSS is the same, and the basic principle is, if it's rubbish land, do CSS. If it's good land, make food. And there we go. And it's also increased, you know, one's enjoyment of actually farming the damn thing and living here. The final thing is this landscape recovery, which you briefly talked about earlier. I wrote the West Norfolk Nature Network bid, which is 18 farmers and landowners in West Norfolk, 3 rivers, and a whole load of rubbish soil. And the idea, in broad brush, is that we restore, re-wiggle, and biodiversify the rivers Gaywood, Middleton Stop Drain, and Nar, the Nar being the closest to me and the closest to my heart. And we farm within, we create 6 or 7 very, very large 100-meter wide scrubby corridors snaking through the entire 30,000 hectare landscape from bottom to top. And we farm in between those those scrubby corridors. And we farm almost in a way that is subservient to nature rather than the other way around, which has always been the case thus far. We've trampled it and killed it in order to produce too much food. That's it.
Thank you, Ollie. That's fantastic. And I have to say that I had some very lovely, warm, handwritten letters from your aunt many years ago that are probably somewhere in the Trust archive.
You must be the only one.
And, you know, it was very apparent in our letters. And she would only correspond by handwritten letter, which was very quaint. Despite our very different backgrounds, very different ways of coming things, you know, her her love of nature and of her place was really apparent. And you know, I
Well,
think
that's
that
very
is
nice of you to say.
I think that
Yeah.
is something that unites us more than divides us very often.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and I think that's kind of the that's the battleground, isn't it? That's what we've got to change.
yeah,
We're all on the same side, really. It's just a question of culture and
yeah,
language, and
absolutely.
not sort of not waving too many red rags at
No,
each other.
no, quite agree. You know. Anyway, Stuart, we had a lovely personal story there from Ollie, and I know your story is sort of equally personal and rooted in your place. So over to you.
So thank you. Just checking you can hear me. Is that, yeah. So I would just like to say that first off, you've broken my duck because I am quite a Luddite. My family are highly entertained on doing this. This is the first Zoom I've ever done. So congratulations. Now, Ollie, for a few minutes there, I was worried that you were going to leave me absolutely nothing to say. Then you go on to the idea of every farmer doing cover crops. And this is where I'm actually going to disagree with you, because I do feel quite, not despondent, that's probably too strong a word, but I do look around my neighbours and the wider picture, and I see what we're doing, and I see the glacial progress around me, and it does make me want to hang my head and cry. And as we've said, the remit tonight was to talk about what we're doing, why we're doing, how we make it work. And the answer is we're doing it because we don't see any other choice. We're doing it because it's really important, and we're making it work by hook or by crook. But that does make me wonder how other people then get on board and are brave enough to do the almost foolhardy things that we've been accused of doing. So here at Old Hall Farm, we've got 500 acres, so 200 hectares between Norwich and Bungay, so 10 miles south of Norwich. So we are a very typical claylands farm, and would very much be heavy blue clay, the sort loving land, it sticks to your feet when you walk across it after you've cultivated it. I have discovered that if you don't cultivate it and you keep it covered all the time, funnily enough, it doesn't stick to you, and it's much more pleasant. So in my former life, and it's interesting to hear Ollie talk about his, in my former life, very intensive farmer, pigs and arable. So we had around about 5,000 pigs, at various points more than, but all indoors. And we grew cereals, wheat and barley mainly, to then turn into mill and mix ourselves to feed our pigs. And we sold a lorry load of pigs per week. So around about 220 pigs to a factory per week. So this was up until about 2015. In 2015, we had a new disease into our pig herd, which made it, in hindsight, even more uneconomic than possibly it was before. We ended up culling out the entire herd, and kind of that gave us an opportunity to take stock and to say, do we want to carry on doing this? And there were various other things happened at the same time. And my wife had been made redundant a couple of years previously. She was looking to get out of working for other people. She came home. My parents had been in Australia. There was lots of things came together, and we were like, well, actually, maybe we don't want to do this anymore. We went on holiday to Scotland, and for any customers out there who do actually come to us and have read our website, it is true, we did go on holiday and we did buy a cow. So if you go on holiday, be careful if you come home with a cow. We now go forwards to sort of 2019, having had one cow at the end of 2016, which was bonfire night. So we've kind of just celebrated the anniversary of the first cow coming. We opened a farm shop with butchery, a delicatessen, a restaurant, and the kind of beating heart of the operation is the raw milk dairy. When we first started selling milk, we had 4 or 5 cows. That was in 2017. In 2019, we had about 25 to 30 cows. We're now up to nearly 60 cows. All the milk is sold direct to a customer. And we've now got to the stage in probably the last 4 years, everything has been sold direct to a customer. So we now have chickens for eggs, we have pigs. So we now have about 15 sows rather than 500 sows. We produce about 4 pigs a week as opposed to 215. We have a beef herd. We have the raw milk dairy herd. But the key is for us, and this is how we're making it pay, is that we sell everything that we produce on the farm to a customer who comes up our drive or who pays postage, and we then send it out online. And that has transformed the way we farm kind of by default. We ended up going down this rabbit hole. We started off with this idea that actually this is a nice idea. This is a farm diversification. This is going to help with just keeping us ticking along as farmers. And then when we kind of went down this rabbit hole, we just kept pulling on the threads, kept exploring the burrows. Customers kept asking us questions. We started to really self-educate ourselves and found out things that we didn't know. For example, you know, the impact of nitrogen fertilizer, what pesticides do. And it was amazing to hear Ollie say that he doesn't use a pesticide on the farm anymore. I mean, I look around me and I could weep. And all of our biggest wins have come from the things that we no longer do. So it's no cultivation. It is no chemicals on the farm. We got to 2019 and we have the world's poorest vineyard in our farm because we decided, having planted the vineyard, that we couldn't treat it conventionally. Then COVID hit and it was all hands to the deck, so the vineyard kind of got forgotten about. The irony being, it was only when we started to look at managing that conventionally, we said, well, we can't manage the vineyard conventionally if we're not going to do anything around it. We can't have a sprayer go up and down the vineyard if we can't have a sprayer go up and down the rest of the farm. And those were the conscious decisions to say, well, actually, now I know this. Now I know the impact of pesticides. Now I know the impact of nitrogen fertilizer. Now I know the impact of soya, for example, in my animal feed. I'm going to have to do something about this. And therefore, I have to find a way to make it work for us. So we get to kind of 2024, and the world is quite different to where we started back in 2016. I now refer to it as my sort of previous life. I was an intensive farmer, and now I am... I've even got the long hair. It's tied up now, but I've got the long hair to demonstrate that I've kind of had some kind of eureka moment, that road to the Damascus conversion, to say, well, actually, I can't do this anymore. And I don't rant and rage and shout at my next door neighbors, but we're here, we're doing the right thing. And I sometimes struggle to understand why other people can't get that. But I've had to have such a paradigm shift from that ultra intensive orthodox farmer to where I am now. And the things that have happened in our personal life and professional life to make that paradigm shift, and I mean, there's a word I didn't even use to know what it meant, which was paradigm, are so vast that to expect conventional farmers just to move is not going to happen. And it's been fascinating to encounter different people, different organizations such as the Wildlife Trust, and I've now been very grateful to be asked to talk at different events and organizations and kind of expand my kind of sphere of influence to say, well, actually, here we are. This is what we're doing. This is not judgment on you, but this is just an alternative way of doing it. And if you're brave enough, there are people out there doing it. So, getting back to the sort of crux of the questions that you were asking, how did we make it work for us? Well, one of the original decisions was, how do we get a bit more grass in our farming system for our cows? We were starting to expand our cow herd. So the conversation started there with countryside stewardship, as Ollie mentioned. And we kind of crunched the numbers, and it was like, well, actually, this is going to pay us basically the same sort of money that we're going to get by farming it with very much less risk. And by the way, no chemicals. So, legume and herbivorous swards has been our thing. You can't put any chemicals on them. Well, that's fine. That's basically what you're getting paid for. We don't want to do that anyway. You can graze them, you can cut them. That worked for our cows. We were hoping after our first 5-year scheme to find a way to then not need to rely on them. I'm going to be honest, the world has happened. That has not been possible. We have signed up for another 5-year scheme, and we are now in the first year of our second 5-year scheme. What comes next, we don't quite know, but we are very grateful for the support that's given us and the confidence to take that forward. That's helped bring the bank along, that's helped bring my parents along on this journey, and just give us that stability. And it's been interesting, a couple of little anecdotes that I will just say. When we've had farmers on farm visits, I will very memorably remember one person standing in the middle of our farm and saying, "Oh yeah, but we can't all do this." I was like, well, technically, if you filled in the forms, actually you could. And then the next comment was, "Oh, well, but where's all the food going to come from?" And then it's like, yeah. And as Ollie said, that's such a complicated question. So the second little anecdote I will just talk about is, we have this thing at the moment right round us, and it is going to affect us probably only with cables, but there is a proposal which I suspect will happen for 2,700 acres worth of solar panels going in all around us. So we weren't asked whether we wanted panels on our farm. And in some ways, I'm kind of glad, because I don't even have to make that decision. We will probably end up with a cable route across the middle of our farm, which I'm a little bit miffed about because I wasn't even asked. But one of the things that's come out of this is the fact that people have been up in arms about, oh, well, this land should produce food. Well, it's not actually producing that much food already. That maize you've got growing right next to your village, that's going to a biodigester down the road. It's trashing your soil, it's trashing the ecology, and it's producing energy. I don't know what the impact of the making of the solar panels is on the environment, but I'm pretty sure that having solar panels for 40 years in those fields is going to be better for nature than growing maize in those fields for 40 years. And those are the sort of things where everything about this whole question about food, the environment, and everything that ties into that is complicated. It's not simple. It is multifaceted, and anyone who comes along and says this is right, this is wrong, it's like, well, yeah, no, actually, I'm not going to listen to you because you don't understand. So the effect for us has been to take this and understand its complexity in a way that I never used to. I was that intensive farmer who used to say that I'm feeding the world, aren't I amazing? Because I didn't understand the complexity. And I've subsequently gone out and I've read books that my 30-year-old self would have just literally chucked out and would have said, there's nothing for me to learn in there. And I was environmentally illiterate. I didn't understand what I was looking at. And I almost have a slightly guilty complex now, because there are so many people out there who would love to have had the opportunity that I have to manage 500 acres, to be in control, to do something amazing with it. And, when Patrick Barkham says the words inspirational, I kind of look behind me and think, well, who's he talking about? Because there's a bit of me that says, well, I've actually wasted some of my opportunity here, but then maybe I wouldn't be sitting here. Well, I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't done that first, because I wouldn't understand what I've done wrong to now turn around and say, maybe I need.
That sounds like a really good spot. If we could pause and
Yeah.
just see if there's any questions, Stuart.
So my point being that you have to understand what you've done to understand where you're going. And it's then a key to say, well, how can we make this relevant, and how can we kind of share it and embrace it with other people and make it relevant to them? And in light of the current government's kind of regulation change, rule change, there is support out there, but it is going to look different, and people are going to have to be brave, and they are going to have to put stuff out there on the line to see what they can do next.
That's really great. Thank you, Stuart, because the one question that's come in on the Q&A is, what are those key support measures that landowners need to make this transition? And are they coming sort of fast enough or for long enough, really? And, you know, I'm happy for either or both of you to chip in on that one. So, you know, what is it you need to happen, and are those measures there? And are they coming quickly enough?
I think it's all there. It's just a question of jumping. So it's quite easy to hover on the edge. And I mean, I'm amazed to hear everything that Stuart's done about selling, you know, the farm to table, and selling meat, you know, eco-regenerative beef in parcels being sent around all over the place. And I mean, God knows how you do that. I sort of give myself a hernia thinking about it. But there certainly needs to be a public shift in the way we consume food. It's all very well us talking about nature regeneration, but the crocodile closest to the canoe it doesn't come for free. We can't have our cake and eat it. We've got to consume food differently, and the way our food system is totally perverse, and it's killing us. It's killing the NHS, and it's killing the natural world. The other side of it is the way we can do it financially is already in place, but we've got to bring the public with us. That's what's missing.
So I would echo what Ollie says, is there is actually enough money there currently to do it. It is, how do you persuade your average land manager to be brave enough to shift? And I only have to look at, like I say, how we used to operate. I only have to look at the conversations I have with my parents to see that is still, in my opinion, an almost insurmountable gap. And you only have to look at what the complaints have been with the view to inheritance tax, and we're feeding the country, we're doing this, we're doing that. And it's like, well, yes, but you are also responsible, like it or not, and for very good reasons, you are also responsible for a lot of the problems that we have caused. And it's going to take I don't know what is going to make a lot of people shift. And my fear is that some of these changes are actually going to push us in the wrong direction, not in the right direction.
I think the whole business of this blended public and private financing approach to nature recovery will be very helpful. The government will underwrite it if it doesn't, you don't get everything you need, but landscape recovery, etc., is starting to take nature recovery away from the public purse, which is absolutely essential. And the next step is to persuade. I have a contract with Wild Farmed, which you'll all know about, Andy Cato and all those dudes, which is great. But it's the sort of sourdough munching hipsters from North London who are buying it. How the hell do we get Mr. and Mrs. Miggins from Lowestoft to pay a few more quid for ethically farmed food? It's a bloody nightmare. And you're absolutely right about the older generation. I mean, my father thinks that I should be sort of locked up for the way we're doing things here. And so and I guess the trust has a huge role to play
Well, I was going to ask actually as our sort of final question, because we need to wrap up in a couple of minutes. Although I have a feeling we could sort of go on for hours if the time allowed. Patrick's nodding vehemently there, so maybe we need to get together and do this in person over a much longer period sometime. But I think my final question to you both is really, as the Wildlife Trust looks to reconsider and expand how it works with land managers of all scales, what is it you really need from us? You know, where can we best support the efforts that you're taking?
Well, the great thing is to break this sort of invisible barrier between so-called nature conservationists and so-called farmers.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure that how that's done, but I think we all live a very public life now, and you can't sort of get out of bed in the morning without it being posted all over social media. So I think for us to hold hands and support each other, even though we disagree, probably. I mean, you and I probably don't, but you would with a lot of farmers. Is to try and make damn sure that we're on the same side and present a united front. And actually, maybe you're very visible to a lot of people, and maybe to celebrate regenerative farming and agriculture rather than to see it as the great dark destroyer of the natural world. Even if you don't necessarily immediately think that, would be a good start.
Yeah,
I'm not saying for a minute that you don't. I'm not saying that you are anti-farming. Of course you're not. I know you're not. But I think that you should probably go a little bit further than you naturally like to in trying to get together.
That's a really great reply, Ollie. Thank you, Stuart.
The couple of things that struck a note with me was the idea of the Norfolk Wildlife Trust taking on a pub in order to, but that's how you engage. It's a bit like when we have people come to our shop and our restaurant. Do you know what? Come and see our cows at the same time. We don't charge. You can literally walk around our shop, come and see the cows being milked, come and get that connection with where your food comes from. And that really struck a chord with me with the acquisition of the pub and a way to engage. And it's to wrap up, it was the idea that when I met Elliot at the Norfolk Landscapes Conference, and really that gave me the sense that actually I sometimes feel very lonely with what we're doing right here. We're called an oasis, and it's like, great, but I don't want to be an oasis. That's not helpful. And his talking about the idea of trying to join up these networks, find out all of these good things that what I would call still my very intensive neighbors are doing. They've still got great stuff happening on their farms. They've all got woods. They've all got these great big corridors. How can we join that up? So you guys talking about your kind of advisory
offer.
Yes, advisory offer. That to me is a really good way of reaching out to farmers, because the one thing that I do find, and we're only now starting to get to the stage, I mean, we're a 500-acre farm. We've just employed a farm manager. How many 500-acre farms are going to do that? But that will give me the bit more time, the bit more headspace to look into all of this. Well, actually, I know a lot of my compatriots, they don't have the time, they don't have the headspace to do this. So a way to be a wildlife advisory group and have that advisory offer with your skin in the game is nature. Everyone else's skin in the game is basically money. Let's face it, that's how the world works. So I'm really on board with that, and it's about bringing people like us together, talking, finding out what can we do, and linking up. So that's how I see the Norfolk Wildlife Trust involvement.
I just want one very, very quick point, which is I think the other thing is that we kind of need to go and do some public tub thumping. And for example, the other thing that is declining is Christianity and religion, and also things like very important community places like not churches just, but also village halls. I gave a talk at at our local church the other day, which is about to crumble into the dust, and talked about landscape recovery and how communities can get involved in landscape recovery, and what you can, community champions, and what you should be eating and all the rest of it. And people were absolutely aghast, and they didn't know these things existed. And so I think that churches and nature and communities we can all sort of lead each other off this away from this sort of spiral of despair if we're stronger by the sum of our parts. I think getting into churches and village halls would also be a really cool way of raising awareness for this stuff.
Well, I can guarantee after those absolutely fantastic answers that we will probably be knocking on your doors fairly soon to come and talk to you quite a lot.
Let's go to your pub and talk about it.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, Ollie. And maybe the pints will be on Elliot. That would be good.
So sorry. So that just ties in with one thing that I've found and that I've really become aware of over the last sort of 8 years since our transition from very intensive farming, which is we farm by consent. And I'm not trying to be funny. That consent could be taken away from us.
Yeah.
And the way we bomb-proof ourselves against that is by getting our local communities on board. So yeah.
Elliot's got his hand up, so I'd like to bring him in at this point.
I'm happy to stand the pints up. That's fine. Let's do it.
Good stuff.
Great. Okay. Well, on that point, thank you so much for joining us. I think that's been absolutely inspirational. And yeah, we will be in touch. Thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Back to you, Patrick.
Thank you so much, Helen, and thank you, Stuart and Ollie, for giving up your time and coming and talking to us this evening. You've got so much on your plates. We really appreciate it. And I genuinely, it is inspirational to see your journeys and how far you've come and the change you've made. And the thing that I love is you can go to, there's not many people. You can go to your place of work and see the impact you've had over the last decade, both of you, in an incredibly short time. And I do urge, I'm sure most of us have been probably to Old Hall Farm Shop and the restaurant down there in South Norfolk. But if you haven't been, go, and also head over west, book yourself a glamping trip and in rolling West Norfolk, Massingham. What a glorious part of our county. That's it for tonight. Thank you very much, everyone who has logged on and joined us. And I hope, given such a fascinating chat from you guys at the end there, that I hope that more people will watch this on the website when it goes up. There's a few thanks to end with, and congratulations as well. So congratulations to our new trustees. It will be fabulous to have your wide range of skills and expertise joining the council. And big congratulations to new Vice President Sue Rowe. It's brilliant that she continues her association with Norfolk Wildlife Trust. And congratulations to Anne Edwards too, of course. What a worthy winner of the Sydney Long medal. I'd like to thank the My Voice team, Simon and Thea, for sorting out all the online bits, and also particularly to Marion Ritchies for all her hard work, our company secretary, in absolutely making tonight happen and run so smoothly. And she also wanted to mention the PR and comms team who are putting all this online too. Thank you also to Elliot and to Alice for their addresses and answers to all the questions. And I'd like to finish actually tonight by dedicating tonight to Brendan Joyce, who was, as Alice so beautifully put, he doesn't just leave a legacy behind, he leaves a landscape. And Brendan, we salute you, and we hope you admire what we're continuing to do and building on that amazing landscape that you've created for all of us. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.